All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hockaday Museum of Art's third version of our Artist Conversation series. This month, we are talking with artists from our current exhibition, Member Salon 2020, past and present winners of our People's Choice Award. For those of you who don't know, our Members Salon is an exhibition that the museum has been doing since 2002. It's a community favorite, and it's always fun for us as a staff to see what work comes in. It's always a fun surprise to see what artists choose to submit each year. And for a month, the first month that the exhibition is up, anybody who comes in can vote on their favorite work of art, and then the artists are awarded first, second, and third prizes. So thank you for joining us tonight, and I'm going to step aside and let the artists introduce themselves and get talking about their work and their experience with the Hockaday and the Member Salon.
Alrighty, I'm Karl Oehrtman. I've been in Kalispell for 37 years. I've not been an artist that whole period of time. I've been a physician and recently retired, and art is helping me bridge that threshold in my life.
I'm Therese, and I have been painting and teaching art for over 20 years. My husband and I retired here, but we seem to be busier than we were ever in the past. I'm not teaching anymore, but I'm painting. His work takes him around the state, so I get to see a lot of places and paint a lot of locations that I would not have had the opportunity otherwise. So I love it.
I'm Nick Oberling. I studied a long time ago at the Art Students League of New York. I'm originally from Long Island in New York, and moved to Montana in 1998. And I've been painting landscapes here for the whole time. And right now, my partner Betsy Bittman and I have a studio gallery on Highway 2 in Hungry Horse, where my works can be seen. And so.
I'm Darlene Morgan. We moved to Montana in 1967. So I've lived here longer than I lived in Utah, where I was born and raised. And we raised our family here, and I worked a lot with my mom when I was younger. My mom was a really well-known landscape artist, and her name was Merle Olson. And however, I don't paint landscapes. I'm a portrait artist, so we never stepped on each other's toes when we were exhibits. And I've just, through the years, I didn't paint for quite a while because we had two sons that got really sick. They were hemophiliacs that got HIV from their blood factor they were using, and they both died of AIDS. So I was really in a caregiving mode for a long time, and then when they died, I was wiped out. And then my mom came to live with me for 2 years, and I took care of her until she died. So I'd just been in a caregiver mode for a long time. So I really didn't start painting again until the early 2000s. So anyway, it's been something I've really enjoyed. I love portraiture. I love painting Native Americans, and that's what I've mostly been doing. So now I'm just old. still painting.
I'm Susan Guthrie, and I'm a native Montanan, and I have been in the Valley here for 34 years. I've been teaching for 34 years, first at Flathead High School and now at the Flathead Valley Community College. I'm an artist first before I'm a teacher, and that's what I think makes me a strong teacher, is my own practice and understanding of things. I like to work in watercolor and oil, and I always think, what is my brand? But I think it's life, because I like a lot of things that give life to me, like the outdoors. I can't be living in a beautiful place like this without being inspired by the outdoors, and I love people. So I paint a variety of subject matters. I'm really working on tonalism at the moment and diffusing some of my images to give mood and even spirituality and feelings about things in life. So, thank you.
Susan, we're really glad you got out of Deer Lodge.
I escaped.
What were you doing in Deer Lodge?
Well, I grew up there from, just before I started school. I was born in Columbus. My family lived in Nye, Montana, up in the canyon there. And my grandma, she cooked for the miners there, and my grandma and grandpa homesteaded there from Kentucky. And, so there's still a schoolhouse my dad went to, and it's a beautiful valley. But so we moved to Deer Lodge, and I went to college then after high school. And my first interview was here at Flathead High School, which was extraordinary to be in a AA school with no experience. 200 people applied for the job. I don't know how I got it, but I did. So, yeah.
Darlene, as you were mourning the death of your sons, did you find that art could be a healing thing for you?
It was just something that I couldn't even approach. I was just so, they died less than 2 years apart. And so it was just a really rough time. And then living with them before they died, the one lived 6 years, the other one lived almost 8 after they were diagnosed. So it was just really rough. And especially the younger one, I was a full-time nurse. And so there was just no time for my painting. And I really didn't have many creative juices rolling around because I was just up to my ears in stress. It was really a stressful time. And at that time, AIDS was scary. And everyone was afraid, and we didn't even dare tell people that they had it. If they'd have known that there was 2 hemophiliacs with AIDS in Big Fork, Montana, holy cow. Because they weren't even reporting any AIDS patients in Montana at the time when they had been diagnosed. So it was like scary.
Yeah.
There was all kinds of misinformation that was flying around, and our youngest one was 11 when he was diagnosed, and the oldest one was 20. So, yeah, it was a tough time.
Yeah.
And then just helping the younger one, because he just tried to cram so much into life in that 6 years. He became an Eagle Scout. He was a state champion in speech and drama, a debate camp champion. He was a science fair champion for the whole county, Flathead County. And so he just was an amazing kid. I mean, these things that he did while he was so sick. So I had to support him in his things. But I really do feel that those years of suffering that I went through helped me with my art when I did start painting again. I saw things at a deeper level than I think I would have previously.
Yeah.
So Nick, did you always know you wanted to be an artist?
Yes, I've just found some childhood pictures of me in my little bedroom with an easel painting away. And it's always been a part of my life and a central focus. And I went to college, went to a decent college, but they didn't have any good art instruction, and I was very frustrated. So it took me a while, but I found the Art Students League. This is before the internet, so you can't really, research was harder to find a place where I could learn from masters. And we studied mostly the figure, painting and drawing, because landscape, there was no landscape really in New York City except Central Park, which was pretty run down at the time. So I spent about 7 years there, just painting and drawing the figure. I was never really that good with painting the figure. I don't think I have one single good portrait or nude or anything. Just struggled. But gradually I started going out to Central Park and doing some plein air painting and falling in love with landscape. So I started my career in New York City with landscape, but then I wanted real landscape, so that's why I moved to Montana. Dangerous landscapes, so you can go out there and be killed by an animal. That kind of thrill, being out there and seeing the real landscape. Although I have to admit, I don't venture too far from my car. I mean, plein air painting is so bulky, and it's. I've done some backcountry, but most of the time you're by your car, so it's not that dangerous. But
Painting in Central Park would be dangerous.
it was pretty dicey at the time.
Yeah.
And had a few close calls. But you learn to have a sixth sense who's around you and what they're doing and scoping you out, and then you pack up quick and get out of there. So, but I've spent many years outdoors doing plein air and all over Montana. I was a founding member of Montana Painters Alliance and did a lot of, it just was a great excuse to get out and see the whole state and paint in a bunch of places. But now I'm less and less of a plein air painter and more of a studio painter, which I find, very thrilling and enjoying, because I have so much experience with the outdoors now that I can just conjure up trees and water whenever I want. And so I just sit in my easel and it starts coming out, no problem.
That's great. I had more of a circuitous route. I always loved painting as a child, and I remember a family vacation to the Grand Tetons when I was probably 12, 13, kind of a snooty pre-teenager, and getting up in the morning and walking down to the lake with my mother. I had my sketchbook with me, I had oil pastels with me, and I sat and drew the mountains and the lake. I think it was Mount Moran and Skillet Glacier, while my mother sat at the other end of the bench saying her morning rosary. So that was kind of plein air painting before it had a name to it.
Yeah.
Then when I got to college, Dad said, art's fine, but get a degree in something you can get a job in. So I went the biology and chemistry route, and I worked as an analytical chemist for about 10 years. And at that point, we had 3 children. My husband's career had taken off. Kids were in school. And so I talked to Gary and said, I'd like to try the art thing again. And I started teaching in a small private studio and doing my own work, taking outdoor painting classes, full sheet watercolor, plein air in Yosemite.
Wow. Oh, wow.
With Jane Burnham was the teacher at the time, and she ran these week-long workshops and brought in outstanding artists like Stephen Quiller and Dale Oehrtman. And I eventually went back to oils when the kids were old enough that I could have wet paint around. Oils are still my first love. So here we are in Montana. As I said, we travel a lot. My husband is the Scout Commissioner for the Boy Scouts of Montana Council. So we get all over the state, and I love to tag along. So that's my story.
So you were mentioning to me that you had this little outdoor setup.
Oh, I tried that, and I'm not sure I would recommend it all the time, but I wanted to see how light I could go backpacking and painting. So I got myself down to Walgreens, got a little pill pack, and put my squirts of paint in the pill pack. Had an empty CD jewel box. So half of that was my painting palette. The other half I had a piece of oil paper taped to, and I could sit, sketch on a rock. They were water-based oils, so I didn't have to worry about solvent. And then just close up the jewel box and put everything in my backpack. Ultra light, but limiting in the amount of material and size that you could carry like that. But it was a fun experiment, and I'd probably try it again.
Do any of you want to talk about your work that you have up in our current members salon?
I can talk about this
Yeah.
one, which did not win an award this year. But the things that move me to paint can either be something visual or something deeper. I love painting plein air and mountains and trees and rocks and water and things like that. I was on a 2-week camping trip with some friends, and I had taken a book with me this year. We spent 2 weeks away from the road with our horses, and I was reading a book at the time called How the South Won the Civil War, and I learned something from that book, and it said that 1 out of 3 cowboys was black. And I thought with the Black Lives Matter movement really being powerful at this time, I wanted to paint a black cowboy. So I met Victor, who's works here at Costco, and he was kind enough to get on one of my horses and let me take a bunch of pictures of him. And I wanted to kind of tell that story of kind of the underappreciated people who had a part in this section of the country and whatnot. So, and he was very fun to work with because he grew up in Uganda, and he wants to give back to his community in Uganda, and so it was really fun to have him have part of that. And he also wanted to represent the black cowboy and do them justice, and he was worried about doing his part for that. So I was very touched by that.
What was it like having Victor as your model? Was it? I think you told me at one time that's your first model that you hired to sit for you. What was that like for you? Was that thrilling?
Yeah, I would love to tell you that I painted while he was on the horse, but I just took a lot of pictures and then tried to use that for reference. It's I guess it's kind of a concern that you're using his time well and doing justice to the layout.
Sure,
And I find that a difficult thing for me in a composition is to really lay out the composition so that it has a really compelling graphic design behind the painting, and so I did a lot of thumbnails to decide on the final sketch, and I wanted to be able to make his face large enough to get a semi-likeness, and I couldn't really figure out how to put a whole horse in there too, so it's just the top of the horse, but that's kind of what worked for me in composition, and it'd be interesting to have all of us look at the same scene, and there would be like probably 20 designs that would be powerful, so.
Was Victor pleased with the result?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And actually, I did 2, and this one doesn't look like him that much. But the other one, I feel like I really got a likeness, and so I gave him that one, and then I kept this one for the show.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So it might be hanging somewhere in Uganda eventually.
Maybe, yeah.
Confusing a lot of locals.
I think he's pretty happy to be in the Flathead Valley.
Oh, it's been over a while.
Yeah.
And did you find the palette hard to find, to what you were going to use for your palette of colors? Was that hard for you to decide, or did you really had an idea of what kind of mood you want? Because it looks like it's like either early morning or like that, sunset or something like that.
Yeah, I tried to capture the early morning light when he came over to pose, and I use a standard kind of a split palette, a warm and a cool of each of the primaries, and then mix from there. And I just did another portrait 2 days ago, and I did a Zorn palette for that one, and that was really
favorites.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's neat to just kind of challenge yourself with different mixing options. And I wanted to really do is skin justice to get that skin tone in. But it seemed I've painted the split palette for long enough that it's like that just kind of comes pretty easily. Where before I would kind of stutter a lot.
I didn't think about it a lot more.
Yeah.
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 Great. It's a great piece.
Well, thank you
I
so much.
really enjoyed it.
Thanks. So.
And your piece is quite attractive up there.
I can,
We should point out it's the winner.
Yes.
that was a surprise. I could go into the composition in it, with the lights and the darks and the directing the eye in and out. And to tell you the truth, I've been painting so long that I just react emotionally when I paint. So this was a day that had just been an exemplary day with dunking kayaks and a picnic lunch. And I guess the only liberties that I took was moving this big rock from way out here outside of the canvas into the scene. And for me, I can hear the water, I can see the lights and shadows on the surface of the water, I can smell the pine duff. For me, it's the total experience is why I like the painting and why I chose to include it here.
Did you work from plein air sketches, or how did you?
That's probably 3 or 4 photographs that I place around me in the studio. Didn't have any sketching material with me that day.
I especially like your luminescent looking through the water in the foreground rocks that are underwater. I think that comes out really strong.
That's a fun contrast to the turbulent water behind it. And the water is so clear up here.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd have a painting to show if I remembered to submit it for the deadline. So I can't really talk about that. So we'll have to go to you.
Well, mine was a picture that my daughter took of. I'm fortunate to have a daughter that's a professional photographer. And she took this picture of our 2 grandsons from 2 different mothers. And they were just on the fence with cowboy hats on. And so I like to do people. I love to do portraits. I've done them as far back as I can remember. Even when I was in elementary school, everyone would say, "Would you draw my portrait?" And so, I've done hundreds and hundreds of pencil sketch portraits of people. So it was just always my niche was people or animals. I love horses. I love to do horses. I've done a lot of horses too. But I just enjoy putting it together and watching it develop into something, hopefully. I always did envy my mom, who was a landscape artist, because with landscapes you can put a tree wherever you want it, or a rock, or whatever, and with portraiture, a little harder to
move that nose.
unless you want to be a Picasso and put it in.
Defy the
But,
Renaissance.
yeah, I would love to be a landscape artist. I look at things all the time and think, oh, I'd love to be able to paint that. But my niche is people and horses and animals, and so
Live.
that's where my abilities are. And I can't remember when I didn't have a pencil in my hand. People, that's a question I'm sure all of you have been asked. When did you decide to be an artist? And I didn't ever decide. It was just something that just was ingrained in me from the time I was a child. And I was lucky to live in a home that my mom was an artist, and I got to grow up in that environment. My brother was an artist, and I just was surrounded by it. So, yeah, it was, but this is my two grandsons. They're a year apart in age. Totally different coloring. One is dark, more olive skin, and the other one is white with blonde hair and white eyelashes. So, that they are little pals. It's just a cute picture she came up with.
It's such a moment, there's a story going on in your piece out there that they're.
And I like to do that. In fact, the first piece I won the People's Choice Award with was two little girls that were standing together, and one had her head thrown back and she was laughing, and the other one was smiling, standing next to her. And when they called and told me I'd won, I wasn't even here. We were always south for the winter. And it was like, really? My black and white won? So I just kind of chopped it up as, it was just because it was such a clever piece with the expressions on their face and everything, and it was a fluke. So then a couple years later, I won first again, and it was like, they like me. So, yeah, but I like to paint interesting things that might tell a story or have more than just a person staring at you, I like interesting pieces. I remember one I did when I was probably in my early 30s, a little Indian girl that had wetter pants, and it was an old photograph, and it was back in the day when they used to pin their little long cotton socks to their diapers. And her diaper was just so full and heavy that it was just sliding down, and the socks are going. And so I like, cute things that are just out of the ordinary too.
Yeah.
That's great.
You snuck up behind you, Susan.
I
Yeah.
felt you.
Yeah.
I knew it.
So I'm gonna move now. I don't want to be in the way because
Jeez.
now you can talk about your piece.
Well, I'm married to a man who's from Chicago, so I've gotten to experience the city and the country, traveled quite a bit, and the cool thing about the whole state, it's a little bit humid. So when you have sun early morning or at night, the tones and the atmospheric parts of it are just intriguing to me, and to try to capture that. This is outside Chicago, about 2 hours and a half probably. We were driving to something hollow. It was this little English cottage forest thing we were invited to go to, and it's a lot of farmland, a lot of marshy land, and so this was that moment, and I repositioned the barn that you see that's kind of right here, and I kind of fooled around with some of the trees and what have you, but it was just that moment, and it was just so joyful and peaceful, serene, and I haven't always been a landscape artist. I love doing people. I've always been an artist, like most of you and all of you out here, and I used to do, when I was growing up in Deer Lodge, I would do these little, first they were geometric designs, and then there were my attempts at people and landscapes, and then I'd invite the neighbor kids to come over, and all my kids around that I played with, to have an art show, and so they'd come into my little area for my art show, and then I'd say, well, thank you for coming up. If you'd like to just take one home with you, you can do that today. And so, so growing up, I always bring my work I took pictures of family members and drew portraits and took them into my teachers, and can I please do the bulletin board? I want to decorate, I just loved it. It's just who I was too, and so, being a teacher is very demanding, and I do have a studio that I try to keep my brushes busy, and I'm hoping, to be able to dedicate more and more time to my work, because I don't want to die without saying all the things I need to say. Don't want those ideas to die, but so that's my piece that I entered into the show this year. It's an oil on linen panel, wood panel.
Susan, I have two questions. I love a comment, I guess, first. I love the color and the color harmony and the calmness of the piece, and it just puts you in a really neat place. So your palette choice, and also how do you varnish where you don't get too much glare but still have that kind of wet look? What advice do you have for the rest of us?
Okay, well, like everybody struggle, what medium, what varnish, what brush, and I really like Gambar varnish, and I like the satin, not the gloss, and I don't like matte. And they actually, where did I find it? I found a brush that it might have, it was on Natural Pigments site. It was a brush that is for varnishing. So I bought it, but I don't know why it's different, or maybe it's psychologically, oh, this is better, it's gonna be better. And so, it is, right now I have the Gambar. I had enough of it. I've not ordered the pre-mixed satin, so I have a jar that has my concoction. I think it's like 2 parts solvent, 8 parts varnish. I can't remember exactly what it is at the moment, but I have, by trial and error, found the gloss, or not the gloss, but the satin finish that I like. But I know now that they have a pre-mixed gloss, satin, or matte varnish, and that's the Gamwood site. Yeah.
It's a beautiful piece.
Thank you so much. It was fun. I fought a lot with some of the foreground to try to manipulate it so it didn't all look the same, and noodle my brush and not get too tight, and found myself tightening up, no, loosen up. And so, you just kind of talk to yourself a lot, woman to woman there. But it was fun, thank you. Comments?
I talk myself through a painting too. And if it's going quite well, I'll have my earbuds in and I'm dancing as I'm painting.
Yeah.
I'm sure the neighbors think I'm wacko,
I have a piano in my studio, so I all of a sudden have to just drop my brushes and go do something else with my hands and then come back. And, and some days I have earplugs in and I have silence, so much silence I can hear myself thinking. Lose yourself in that beautiful spot we all love, that right brain mode, where the world can kind of fall away and you can take a deep breath, and you make choices that you sometimes stand back and look and go, how did I do that? That's with my watercolors. I've done a big jazz series there and had several solo shows with it, one here in fact. And I look at some of those paintings and I think, I wonder how I did that, because I'm so deep in there in that zone of just delight, and I long for that place every day to get to do that. I don't get to do it every day, but I like to. Thank you, Kathy.
Nick, you often work very, very big pieces.
Yes.
I was impressed at the one plein air show that there was like these giant pieces in my mind that you completed. How can you turn that into art so quickly and on that scale?
I don't know how I did it myself. There was a period in my life where I was working on giant plein airs that were 24 by 36s.
Wow.
And I would just zip through them, and sometimes they would bomb. So I wasn't always, a success. It was like a massive train wreck when it wasn't going well. But it was a real thrill because you had the same amount of time as you would with a small piece, but you had to just think really fast. And the weather is changing like it always does, and it's windy. And I made these brushes, special brushes. They were mostly house painting brushes, but I'd give them crazy haircuts. And so I was able to do a lot of the tree shorthands. So I got a system going really, really fast. But so I did that. That was a phase. And I have a few good paintings out of it. But I generally now like to just, like you mentioned, you find that sweet spot in your head and stay in the studio. I've done enough plein air now, and I could just start. Blank canvas doesn't intimidate me at all. I just start right away, and I don't even know what's going to happen. I throw stuff on and push things around, and I have some YouTube tapes of me painting, just give an idea what I do. And I'd like to do a demo. This is my thing that I was going to do, but it's going to be like a big painting. I have an hour to do it, and everyone in the audience comes up and does something on it. And then I have like 40 minutes to make it into a painting without any planning. And so I kind of like that thrill.
That's a great idea, yes.
And Betsy helped me come up with that
No,
idea.
I'm trying for you to tell everybody about the hugest painting that you made
Oh, you mean at the bank?
at the Freedom Bank.
Oh, I made a giant painting at 9 feet by 14 feet at Freedom Bank.
Wow.
And I had to make that in sections, and I didn't have any big place in my studio to see the whole thing. So I just did the sections and hope to God they came together. And then I finally figured out if I put them on the side of the building and paint outside, which I did, it worked. So they assembled that, and it's behind the tellers in the Freedom Bank in Columbia Falls. So it was a lot of fun.
Oh, wow. That was crazy. I bet when you worked that big, were you finding it took so much more to make to have what you needed to make a big painting like that work, like enough in the subject matter that you were doing?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I see, everything to me is like, you can distill the detail down to just abstract things. So like on a large scale, you just come up with a shorthand for the detail so that you're not noodling it too much, not photographic, but you have the impression of detail. That's kind of like what I saw in Therese's work, his good works, You can see that you get this fantastic foreground, which has a great texture and great sense of detail and everything, and but it isn't noodled and really noodled to death. So I'm trying to come up with my own shorthand so that it would read it as detail from a distance. So I had to do that. Otherwise, I'd just still be working on it.
Thank you, that's great.
Sure.
Well, you're talking about being in the zone when we're painting, and that is a marvelous spot to be. But I have to share with you from this past fall's plein air week, rather than being in the zone, we were in the adrenaline. Ginny Ogle and I had found our way up to the top of one of the Forest Service lookouts in the Swan Valley. So we were out on the walkway, on the catwalk there, and early COVID, so we were each on opposite sides so that we were distanced, and the storm started rolling in. And I hear Ginny on the other side, well, it's starting to get windy over here. Well, it's starting to rain over here, and then it all moves over to where I was, and then the thunder and the lightning started. And there's this steel cable running right down behind my metal easel all the way to the ground, and I'm thinking, that is lightning rod.
Wow.
So when the storm really broke on us, we just threw everything together in bags and down the stairs as fast as we could get. And the adrenaline rush from that whole painting, it may not be a good painting at all, but it's always will be memorable.
But it's so great to go out in those forest, those towers and the fire towers and everything you should go to, and the lookouts are so fun to go to, and I'm glad you had shelter.
Shelter was the cars when we got down. The cabin of the tower was locked. We weren't in there. We were just outside.
Oh my goodness, that's a great story.
That's one thing you couldn't say about this year's plein air event. It was wet.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, the forest was soggy. I was
Yeah.
up there riding bikes, and oh my goodness, it was crazy. Yeah.
So I guess we have to talk about how winning the first place impacted us. That was a question I remember. Because we have to check them off the list, cover everything. Well, I just wanted to add to that. It's very nice. Painting is a solitary profession in my view, for the most part, and you enter shows, you drop the painting off, you come and pick it up several months later, and you walk home with it. You have no idea if anyone liked it or saw it or whatever. But when you get an award, it's nice little things showing that people were looking at it, and you're painting for an audience, so it's nice to have that connection. So it's a good thing that the museum does this member show, and everyone should be a member of the Hockaday. I'm going to plug that right now. And I think it's a wonderful thing that they do for the artists.
So did any of the rest of you have anything, were you impacted in any way when you won an award from here, from the
Well,
show?
I was surprised, like, I think I didn't paint thinking of even trying to win anything, I just love painting, just showing up for the love of it, right? So my first People's Choice was a little watercolor of a girl, one of my girlfriend's little girls named Abigail. She was painting and just discussing her painting while I was just taking some photos, and then, so I just did this little watercolor, and I remember coming to the opening, and somebody says, "Oh, you won one of the People's Choice Awards." I go, I what? I did what? And so I went and saw it. They had it such a beautiful, it was like on the side of one of the pillars, and I thought, wow, that was just very encouraging, right? And then I did a big 24 by 36 inch. It was in Suffolk, in England, with like a water and a bridge in it, and some birds, and kind of gray day, kind of flat light. And that one I was really blown away because I was under the gun to paint it, and so I think it was probably better because I didn't slow down, and it was more, there's the emotion showed through in the brushwork, and I learned a lot about my brushwork in that painting too, which, oil is, you build that painting, you sculpt that painting, so it's always about getting paint on your brush, so you paint with paint, right? So that was a painting that really pushed me forward in that, and I really loved that. I was really grateful, and I've been a part of the Hockaday for a while, since I moved here 34 years ago. Before you had the members show, I remember we had all kinds of shows, but so that's been such a pleasure and an honor to be a part of, and such a great community. And I'm putting a plug in too, because I'm so grateful we have the arts here in the Flathead Valley, because there's so many artists, and Cooley, the thing that just kind of is kind of an oxymoron is we have no art stores here. And that's always like just really troubling for me. All of this artists, but thank you to the Hockaday for all you do, and would love to get back in your plein air in the spring when you have your plein air paint out. I'm not the greatest at plein air, but I want to learn more.
I'd love to know what everybody has on their easels currently. What's your wet paint you have on your easel?
I actually have a painting of my daughter's father-in-law's dad. So she asked me to paint that. So.
Family tree in the back of the canvas.
Yeah, so I just painted a picture of John Heine, who was OBGYN doc here in the valley for
Oh,
years.
wow.
And,
Delivered 2 of my babies.
So I've got a painting of him right now, and so I'm anxious to get some varnish on it pretty soon. And, yeah.
Oh, I can't wait to see it. Yes.
And what are you working on?
Oh, how about you?
Well, I'm working on, I have a problem. I'm in love with mountains. So anytime I start painting with I started painting with a mountain in it, and all of a sudden it's all mountain, nothing else. So this one is definitely planned that way, and it's a view from going to the Sun Road in the early evening with soft light, kind of I'm hoping for a misty atmosphere. Late summer and early evening, looking up with all the mountains around. and just struggling with that foreground that I don't want to get too niggly, but I want it to feel natural. So that's what's on my easel.
Foregrounds are a challenge.
They can be.
Yeah.
Middle ground, fine. Distance, fine. That stuff at your feet,
Yeah. Well, I'm working on a large winter scene that I started with the sky, and I like to make up something, just some wild sky, and then see if I can control it and make it logical. And so I got that down, and then I took one of my favorite motifs, which is an area near the old Costco, which I always go back to in my mind, and they've done sketches in mini plein air of. And so I put those trees, but there's not enough snow this year, so I had to just add the snow on the painting on my trees. And so I did that, so it's coming along. It's now at this stage where it's a love-hate thing, because I've got all the fun stuff done, but some things aren't quite working out, and I have to look at it a long time and try to figure out how to get it to come together totally. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Well, I just finished 2 small pastels and sent them to Dixie Invitational Art Show in St. George, Utah. And that show opens on the President's Day weekend. But I haven't started anything else. I need to go to my ophthalmologist and have cataracts removed, and so my work is very detailed and close up, and I'm having a struggle. So I figure I'm going to get that surgery behind me. They were going to do it last fall, but because of COVID, he said, why don't we just wait 6 months? And so, but I can really see a difference in the last 4 months. So need to get that done. So actually what I've been doing is knitting. Make up my own patterns. So that's an art in itself. So yeah, and even at that, I'm having a struggle because my eyes just, even when I put cheater glasses on, it's like, oh, I can't see. So yeah, it's just kind of gonna have to wait until I get through that surgery, I think.
You may be channeling onto Monet.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, so I'm glad I got those 2 small ones done. I did struggle a little bit with them, but and I did 3 of my grandchildren 4 of my grandchildren this last summer. Their portraits. I told my daughters, I want to get these done before I die. So.
It's going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
When is your surgery for your cataract?
Well, I go in April for my 6-month checkup with my doctor, my ophthalmologist, so we will set a date then. Because he told me, he says, when you can't paint anymore and you're having difficulties, you just cry uncle. So I'm going to go in and say uncle.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Wow.
goes along with
Speedy
age.
recovery.
Yeah. Well, I hope. I have very precarious eyes. I've had glaucoma for 40 years and macular degeneration for 2 years. And my original ophthalmologist, old Dr. Gibson, told me that I had scary optic nerves.
Oh, wow.
They're not healthy. They're very delicate and crappy optic nerves. So I just
Yes.
think, oh, this isn't good for an artist. So I hope that the cataract surgery will give me a few years of painting before nature takes its course. I mean, they've kept my glaucoma under good control, and the macular degeneration is still in the dry stage. So I'm not too worried, but never know.
Wish you a speedy recovery on that.
Yeah, well, it's, I don't like the thoughts of the needle coming towards my eye. That's the biggest thing I've got to get over is that needle. If everybody says, oh, they stick a needle in your eye. Stuff like that.
Bear on my eyes.
But, yeah, I just need to get that done, and then I can more seriously tackle doing a better job, because I don't want to sit and struggle with it.
And what are you painting, Susan?
Well, it's COVID, and I have a very, not rowdy dog, but he has to have a job. So every day, at a certain time, he's asking for walks and hikes, and I hike a lot. So during COVID, I've gone out almost every day to be outside and get some air, and whether I'm running or hiking or walking, doing lunges or whatever when the gyms were closed. So I drove up to Star Meadows, and there was there's this great forest and hills and things, and there was a path ahead, and it just struck me the way the sun was in the west, and how just the foggy light of the light and that mood that was coming through. It was a little bit snowy, and so I have got like an underpainting done in just black and white, and I'm going to try a series of indirect painting on this with some glazes first before I work up the body of the painting. So I'm hoping it's going to be really luminous and really, captures that moment that was just stopped me from hiking and let my dog go. You just do what you got to do. You do your thing. I'm going to do mine for a minute, And so we'll see.
It'll be fun to see.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to do it. I don't usually work indirect. I usually work direct painting in oil. So.
Do you guys have a compositional pattern, like the Edgar Payne book? I find I tend to go like into an S-shaped composition and then steel yard and those types of things. Do you guys have a favorite structure that you tend to build on?
I think around here, the S shape or almost a Z where you get those overlapping planes, it seems, at least in landscape, it's there for you. So I don't think a lot about it unless there is something I need to move a little bit. Artist license. But.
Yeah, it just depends what you're painting too out there, whether it's the strings or the path of, like, I'm just thinking, what is my piece right now on my easel, and it's probably the steel, what's it called?
Steel yard.
Yeah, because there's trees and bigger amounts of trees here, but then they separate and that little path goes back in there. So, just I think for me it depends on what I'm painting, but S curves and Z's are, in this area, or the park, or south or north, whatever way you go, kind of, does lend itself. That's a good one.
How about you?
Well, I just do a whole bunch of stuff. I'm always looking at the masters and the way they brought your eye into the painting. And I always like the sneaking in a view of the distant horizon somewhere so that you have an ultimate goal for the eye to go to. And but I don't follow the paint method. I just do a lot of diagonals and a lot of, I guess, gestural lines, and sort of develop it along those lines. And I think the rule of thumb is just avoid the middle, whatever you do.
Yeah.
Just, if you're at halfway in the canvas, that something's bad is going to happen to you. It's not going to end good. So that's about it. How about you, Karl?
Yeah, I think I tend to do
The Edgar Payne,
S-shaped and the steel yard. Those are kind of my go-to approaches.
You probably don't even think about it as you're putting your painting together anymore.
Yeah.
It just comes.
Yeah.
But I like Nick's idea of being able to get back out of the painting again. Not always, but usually I like a way to let the eye escape and not be trapped.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I hate walls. It's hard, when you have a wall in front of you, like painting an avalanche lake. That's, to me, a difficult place to paint because it's just a giant wall. So you have to break it up. You have to get the eye from the lake to the sky somehow. So you could use, clouds, or you can use snow fields. But I have a phobia for just a wall. I gotta do something to break it up.
Mhm.
It's interesting to paint Glacier Park because it's like plein air or like a landscape that's on steroids. It's so big to try to do justice to what's there.
Yeah. And sometimes you can't make the change if it's something iconic. I remember painting in Yosemite. Half Dome is shaped like that, and you can't take a lot of liberty with that, or somebody says, you don't know what you're doing.
It's
So
kinda
it's the same thing with Avalanche Lake. You have to be careful.
Well, it's kind of like portraiture and nature together, because you have an iconic mountain, and you really do have to paint it. I would find that very constricting, because I'm glad that, you know, I can paint mountains, and somebody could say, well, that looks like such and such mountain, but, you know, maybe not, because, I mean, they all sort of crumble away anyway, so, you know, it'll look one way from one view, and then another way if someone's looking at it 10 miles away, so I don't worry about that too much, but, yeah, those like the Tetons, you have to get those exactly right, because people are gonna say, you know, Mount Moran doesn't look that way, or whatever.
But we were down at the Oxbow Bend in a lower McDonald Creek,
Mm-hmm.
and the river has changed just in 2 years.
Oh, yeah?
It's just amazing. So the rocks will stay put a little bit longer, but the water moves.
Therese, how do you, when you approach rushing water like that, how do you start, like Lisa, I think it's courageous to do this rushing water the way you did it.
How do I do it? I'm like you, it just kind of
How
happens.
did that?
I think I put in my shadowed areas first and make sure that I have a lot of color in the shadows that still stay in that value. I like to do a lot of knife work towards the end, but I will soften a lot of the knife work with a brush so it doesn't look like two different styles, but integrates a little bit better.
Yeah, you must have to look at it very abstractly.
I guess.
I mean, it's not like just a water shape, but it's a shape that gives the illusion of a water, but those shapes are so different in that water. I mean, it's quite amazing.
Well, thank you, but it's fun when it comes together. But it doesn't always come together.
Oh, I get it. Thank you all, that was really fun. Thanks so
Yeah.
much, that was great to be with you.
Hopefully it recorded, or we'll have to do it all over again.
Yeah, I might have to crack open the champagne then.
Each get a bottle of champagne. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you to all of the artists for being here. And just to let everybody know, the Member Salon is up through February 27th of this year, so please come check it out here at the Hockaday Museum of Art. And if you are not a member, please consider becoming one, because you can enter the Member Salon for next year. So thank you again, and have a wonderful evening, or
Thank you.
morning, or afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
We're still in live mode.